Who said that? Yeah, winner, winner, chicken dinner. 1982 it came out, and it was the highest, or most sold, or the most popular game, whatever, however they measured that, back for Atari 2600. Anybody know the character's name? We're going to talk about Pitfall the whole time. Pitfall Harry was the character. Pitfall Harry's objective was to go through the jungle while avoiding all the obstacles and hazards that's in his way and collect some treasure, right? So pretty, very intense game. It's amazing how fun that was, but you look at games today compared to this, and they're different, a lot different. But when you started a new game, or you do anything that's new, you come in with what? A set of expectations, right? Even when you played this game, you had an expectation of what this game is going to be like. And then sometimes you're pleasantly surprised, sometimes you're unpleasantly surprised, right? And that's how expectations work. Sometimes they're awesome when they're met. And when they're not met, it's not so good, is it? Right? So that's what the talk is about, not Pitfall Harry, but we're going to talk about some expectations. So this is me. Introduce myself. I'm still Chris Dunn, just so in case you wanted to know. But I'm one of the Agile coaches here at Nelnet. I am a IC Agile certified expert in Agile coaching. I've also done some really training with the best in the industry of both professional coaching as well as Agile coaching through ACI, Agile Coaching Institute, as well as Coaches Training Institute. I don't live in the mountains, but I get to see that view on my drive in. It's kind of a cool view. And the picture below that, no, I'm just kidding. So what about expectations? What do you expect? A couple of you got it, thank you. So what do you expect if there's some sheets on the paper, and I want to this is kind of a silent activity. I want to kick this off with you guys. Take a sheet of paper, something to write with, and I want to do a little bit of reflection about expectations. I may ask you to share. I don't know yet. This is the first time I've ever done this. All right. So when you think about expectations, well, let me take a step back. Every one of us is a part of a team, right? You guys with me?
Yep.
Every one of us is a part of a team of some sort, whether I'm talking about work or in our personal lives.
Need more paper? My box. All the tables should have paper except for the back couple.
So teams. Are we all set? In the back? So we're all a part of a team of some sort, right? So you can think of your family as a team, one to many, or probably not one, team of one. Probably doesn't make sense, but multiple people, right, that are working together toward a common goal. That's what I consider as a team. Maybe it's a sports team, maybe it's a work team, maybe it's a church group. Whatever you participate in, you work with a group of people toward a common goal, right? And so in your mind, I want you to kind of get that in your frame of reference. Be thinking about a team as I ask some questions, okay? What expectations do you have of your teammates? Write down a couple on that sheet of paper. What are some expectations that you have of your teammates? So for example, if you're thinking of family and you have children, well, I expect my children to clean their room, right? It's a very simple and easy one, but so second question. This one might be a little bit harder to think about, or at least come up with something, but try to dig deeper, a little bit deeper than the first one. The first one's probably easy. The second one's a little harder. What expectations do you believe they have of you? What expectations do you believe they have of you? or two, just to kind of get your head in the right place. And the last question I want you to think of, as it relates to this team, what expectations do you have of yourself for this team? What expectations do you have of yourself on this team? And as you're finishing your final thought on that, and we'll move on here, there's a sign-up sheet that's going to be sent around. Erin's got it. See Erin? Everybody wave to Erin. She's known me. Hi. Erin. That's going to be sent around. If you would just sign it. We use that for swag that we hand out. And so your name will go in a drawing. It's not that we're doing some analytics and figuring out who your boss is and making sure you tell your boss that you were here or you weren't here. You wouldn't sign it if you weren't here. Again, going back to the telepathic piece maybe. But yeah, so please sign that. It'll come around. Try to be as least disruptive as possible on that. And if you didn't get to sign it by the time we finish the session, just find one of us and we'll help you get it squared away. Okay?
Is it Colin? Are you doing it?
Yeah.
So
Colin in the back, he's going to make sure you get signed up if you don't get it by the end of the session, because there's a lot of you. Okay, cool. So the thoughts and the expectations. So the first one was, what expectations do you have of your teammates? What do they have of you? And then what do you have of yourself, right? So we're going to use that at the end of the session, kind of put that away. We'll talk a little bit about those as we move on. So I like to use definitions. I like to use science. I like to use different things into some of the talks that I conduct. But one of the definitions I found about expectations, and I love this definition, expectations are one-sided fantasies that often result in confusion, misunderstanding, and disconnection. Okay? One-sided fantasies. What does that mean? What do you think that means? I mean, does that resonate with you guys? Because if I have an expectation, there's an operative word there. I have an expectation, right? I might have an expectation of you. We all have expectations of one another. But oftentimes they're one-sided fantasies, okay? And it leads to confusion, misunderstanding, and disconnection. And then getting into some research that I like to use, Dilbert. How are you doing in your unspoken objectives? An objective might be an expectation. My what? The ones that I'm referring to that I have in mind that I've never mentioned. How are those going? Nailing it. Right? And so the reason I ask those questions at the beginning is to think about how many of those expectations, if it's what do I have of my teammates, how many of those have I articulated to my teammates? And how about the ones that I believe that they have of me? There's your belief. It's not necessarily the truth. Right? So maybe, I guarantee you, not maybe, I guarantee you they have expectations of you. You probably have no idea. I have expectations of each and every one of you in this room. I'm not going to share them. How does that feel? Right? How does that feel? If I don't share my expectations with you, you have a chance of missing, right? If you cared, right? If you cared about meeting the expectations of others, right? It doesn't feel good if you don't know what they are. One-sided fantasies. So what's going on in the brain when expectations are being met and when they're not being met? When they're met, dopamine, a chemical, gets released in our brain. And those of you that know anything about dopamine, that's kind of the happy drug, or the chemical in your brain that you feel joy, you feel excitement, you get focused. You keep doing more of that because it feels good, right? Dopamine makes you feel good. So when you meet expectations, everything's awesome. Quite the opposite happens when expectations are not being met, right? How many can relate to when an expectation isn't met over and over and over, that you feel maybe a little depressed about that, depending on the teammate, right? Certainly if we talk about family teammates, you feel a little depressed about that. Man, they just are like your kids, for example. They're not meeting my expectations. I told them 20 times. When is he ever going to get it, right? Science has shown that there's maybe a depreciation of dopamine in the brain, or an absence of dopamine. And what they're finding is that some of the same symptoms of depression are present when expectations are not being met. It's not me saying, this is what scientists and psychologists are saying, right? And so you start to feel some of that, the tired maybe, certainly some hopelessness, right? Like I said, you're never going to get it, okay? So that's the risk of expectations not being met, is you might be met with some depression or feel depression when those aren't being met. Because we talked about science, being a math major, you have no evidence of that. Being a math major, I want to bring in a formula, and it's a very simple formula. Expectation minus observation equals frustration. All that means is the difference between what I expect and what I observe generally results in frustration, right? And when we get are most mad, it's typically when an expectation isn't being met for us, right? The larger the delta, the bigger the frustration. You guys agree with that? So what I observe, the difference between what I observe and what I expect can really get me fired up, okay? How about this for an expectation? So those of you that can't read, this isn't what I expected. Mom says, this is not what I expected when I bought the tickets for Disney on Ice. Here's the interesting thing about expectations, however. You've got mom in the picture who bought tickets for her children. You've got two children in the picture that had an expectation of what Disney on Ice was, right? You've got two different perspectives, probably two very different set of expectations, right? Expectations are really hard. They're goofy. All of us have different expectations. I love this picture because I imagine them both feeling very different things, right? Mom being somewhat protective, worried about the children. She's probably ticked off because she spent money and this is what she gets. The kids are like, oh my God, they're freaking out maybe a little bit. I don't know. Maybe the boy likes it. I don't know. But all kinds of things could go on with that picture. So the point is that I believe that we all have a playbook, a set of rules, a set of expectations for one another, right? You guys believe that? Like I said, when we walked in the room, you had expectations about what Agile Camp is. And they're constantly being refined. You may have heard my name, hopefully in good circles, I don't know, but you probably had some expectations of who this guy is, right? You know nothing about me necessarily, but you have some expectations based on maybe the title or the role that I play for the organization. We come in with different set of playbooks for each other, for our teammates, for whatever it is that we're doing throughout our lives, right? So it's challenging, it's different. Hopefully, on a team, we have some overlapping rules or expectations of one another. That's the best case scenario. Right? Again, why I kind of went through that exercise thinking about those expectations. What if we published each of our playbooks, right? If you can kind of use that metaphor that I've got a playbook, a set of expectations for each and every one of you, right? It might be different based on the role that you play, maybe how long you've been with the organization, maybe things that I've heard about you, whatever it might be. But I might have a set of expectations. And then I published that and shared it with you. What do you think that would be like? Would that be a better way? If you knew everything that was here or in my playbook, easier, right? Maybe? You guys awake? Right?
Yes.
I expect you to be, no. When do we find out that we didn't meet an expectation of one of our teammates? What's that? Yeah, generally when it's not met, right? And what I'm already ticked off. They say, you know what, DJ Jazzy Fresh, I expected, or I thought you should already know. Anytime you say should or ought, that's an expectation. You're just using different words, right? You should have known. How could you possibly not know, right? That's an expectation coming out. And you usually don't find that out until after the fact, after it was not being met, right? Same with the kids, go clean your room. Well, what I meant was, pick all the stuff up, not just throw it under the bed. Maybe parents have that one, that one's fun. So we have some dangerous expectations. They are very volatile. They can create all kinds of misunderstanding, confusion, certainly a high level of frustration. I break them down into two different types. I'll say time as he throws up the thing. One of which is the unspoken expectations, right? Kind of what we're talking about here. The main theme of this talk is the unspoken expectation, the things that are in my head that you have no idea about. Extremely dangerous. But sometimes, though that's somewhat obvious, right? Maybe it's obvious. Hopefully it's a little bit obvious. But there's some that are a bit more subtle with respect to unspokens. Say, for example, I facilitate a meeting, and it's a standing meeting at 9 o'clock every day. And I say to the team, I expect us to all arrive on time. I expect us all. So you guys, cool. I'll be there at 9. I don't want to not meet your expectation because I'm a good person too, right? We all have good intent. So we all show up at 9. And then you guys are wondering, why is he so angry? I got here at 9. Well, I'm ticked off because we don't start until 7 after. Why do we start at 7 after? Because we're a distributed company, right? We're all working different locations. We're getting WebEx set up, and I'm having problems with the computer. It's rebooting. I don't know. Video won't work. I can't get. So all those things happen. So it's unspoken that I expect to start at 9, not just arrive at 9. And so there should ensue a negotiation here, right? Because though I thought I articulated it, in fact, I was slightly off in how I said it, right? What I really meant was, I want to get started at 9. So if you need to get there 5 minutes earlier, just do so we can get going, right? So the unspoken expectation. The other is maybe a veiled expectation. For me, and it may be different for you, but for me, these usually come in the form of a question. Maybe a silly example, but a simple one. Maybe I asked the room, and this isn't going to happen, so that's a disclaimer. I asked the room, what would you like for lunch? And I even go as far as to say, take one of these sheets of paper and start passing it around, and we'll collect all your orders. Right? So you guys are like, cool, I'm getting lunch today. I'll get whatever I want. He asked for my opinion. He cares about that opinion. And then by the time it comes back around, I go, you know what? I went ahead and ordered pizza. Maybe 25% of you are cool with that. Say, cool, that's what I wanted anyway. But the rest of you are like, why did you even waste my time? Right? That's a veiled expectation. That expectation of, I'm giving you a seat at the table. I'm allowing you to make a decision and have input into what it is that we're going to do. In this case, lunch. Right? And then you got the wrong answer, so I ordered pizza anyway. I was kind of expecting everyone to say pizza because it was easy for me. Right? So that's a veiled expectation. You guys get kind of the difference? Right? Anybody experience something like that? Right? Teammates. I know we got some DTMs in the room, but any of your DTMs ever do that? Yeah. Cool. Stop it. Right? But here's the deal. You are in control of what? Of you. You are in control of how you respond. You are in control of your emotions, right? So when expectations aren't being met, kind of assess it. Assess yourself. What's going on here? Why am I so angry about this? Right? So look inward, not outward. Okay? And I like this guy. For those of you who can't read it, how to control your emotions. And once you know how to do this, everything becomes easy. Like, sure, but let's look inward. If you don't meet my expectations, whose problem is that? It's mine. Right? If you don't meet my expectations, that's my problem. There can be many things wrong with my expectations, such as they're unreasonable. Worse, maybe I never even spoke them. Right? So when you get frustrated, start getting really, really curious about yourself. What's going on for you? Why are you frustrated? What's not working for me? How am I approaching this situation? What is causing me this frustration? And identify why exactly you're feeling the frustration, right? And it might be as a result of unmet expectations. When they're not being met, this is what you can do. When your expectations are not being met, evaluate everything starting with yourself. Okay? I can't say that enough. Start with yourself. Ask yourself a number of questions around such as, was the expectation reasonable? Was it attainable? Was it even possible? Right? You guys might ask me to, hey, Chris, I expect you to write some code. I haven't written a line of code in 10 plus years. Once upon a time, that would have been an okay thing for you to ask of me. Not anymore. Right? I could attain it, but it would take probably a lot more time than you would expect. Right? Because you want me to hit the ground running? Because you did it many, many years ago. Probably not a fair expectation. You agree? Right? You don't need to nod so vigorously. Smart guy. But was it reasonable? Was it attainable? What could I have done to improve the outcome here? Right? Maybe I did articulate it, but maybe I didn't say it in a way kind of like the meeting, right? When my expectation was that we started at 9, but I worded it as arrive on time, right? Subtle difference, but clearly there was an expectation that I didn't articulate well or clearly. Brainstorm the situation with whomever you're having frustration with as it relates to expectations. Go through some of those questions. What would be a better expectation for you? Right? It's not attainable. I'll read your code. I might be able to make heads or tails of it. I might even go through, say, coding standards and say that you're meeting some of the coding standards, right? I might be able to do that. But I count on you to make sure it works, right? So brainstorm, negotiate those. Once you go through those, establish some working agreements around them, right? So using that one example of being on time versus starting on time, very kind of different, subtly different. Let's revise our working agreements to say such, and really agree to that, and then evaluate it throughout as we go along. What else can you do when expectations aren't being met? What are some other ideas? Anyone? No one?
Change your expectations.
Change the expectations, yeah. So it's part of the negotiation, right? I'm a little, maybe using the example of cleaning your room. Well, I can't do it on, my son might say I can't do it on Tuesdays because I get hammered with homework, right, on Monday nights. Or Tuesday, or whatever. Did I say Tuesday? Doesn't matter. But you get the idea. There might be reasons why they can't achieve that in that given day. They can any other day. Or maybe as it relates to your working environment, I can't do that on these days because I'm just swamped with these activities. And so what would be better would be fill in the blank. Right? So it's a negotiation. But have it. Don't continue getting frustrated. If you continue to get frustrated, that's on you. Now, if you've articulated and you had some negotiation, there's some different things going on there that you need different help with, but this talk isn't going to cover it. So what will you do? Remember the things that you've written down? How many of you wrote down things that you're pretty sure you haven't articulated to your teammates? So, yeah, so of those things that so how many of you are not raising your hand because you are thinking, well, they should already know these things, right? Being honest. So again, remember when you say should or ought, words like that, that's an expectation you have of them. Maybe just try it. You know, I know it's obvious, but I kind of expect you to do these things. They might go, you do? Seriously? Right? And so there starts the conversation, right? So if you have expectations that you wrote down, whether they're your expectations of them, what you perceive their expectations of you, maybe of what you expect of yourself, how many of you might share those with your team? At least two, good. Try it, right? Try it out. Have some open dialogue. Be honest with one another. Talk about what it is that you expect of one another. I guarantee you that your life will be a little bit easier, certainly. You might have some tough conversations up front, probably, but at least once you get through those, and you get through the negotiation, and you have some give and take types of things, yeah, okay, that's unfair for me to expect that of you. So what do we do instead? Maybe the conversation goes there, right? That's a better way of working with your teammates, or living with your teammates if we're talking family, right? How about Agile Camp? What expectations do you have for Agile Camp? Whatever they are, please put them on the feedback form. That would be greatly appreciated. So bottom line, guys, expectations are very dangerous, especially when they're not spoken. There's a negotiation that might happen, but it is one-sided fantasies that result in what? Frustration, confusion, disconnection. None of that's good, right? Especially when it's related to a team. I don't think it at all, but especially as it relates to a team. And I'll close on one final note. How many of you believe there's some different, and I'm just curious, this is mostly a curious thing, and you can do the research yourself. But out there in the Google world, in the interwebs, if you will, there's a number of camps of science that say, well, live a happy life by having no expectations. I don't think that's possible personally, that's just me. But there's another camp that says, well, just lower them. You can't zero them. You might be able to, move towards zero, or at least getting them to a point to where, yeah. But think about your job, right? You have a job title. There's an expectation that I do these functions. There's an expectation right there. So zeroing that out, probably not going to work, right? So expectations are real. They're here. Talk about them. Work through them with your teammates. Please provide your feedback. Thank you.